Shut up and sit down.
Hey! The carburetor battery's flat! We gotta go back!
Old bike, rode it my whole life.
You are listening to the Dialed Podcast with the not-so-aerodynamic Matt Legrand, Evan Price, Lance Hepler, and Jake Von Turing. Enjoy.
Riding down hillsides. Hey.
Watts, bonk, slam, snap, off, tempo, chamois, carback, endo, cadence, hammer, fondo, arrow, threshold, breakaway, century, peloton, and VO2 max.
On my bicycle, singing my song. On my bicycle ride.
Choose your arch enemy from the following list: mountain biker, triathlete, clueless cyclist, motorist, pothole, or gluten.
On our bicycle ride, everyone's had it alone sometimes, but it's better to have a companion ride. Everyone's Saturday night goes wrong sometimes. I love the ride.
Own the road. Motorists will be more than happy to share the road with an environmentally conscious and active citizen like yourself.
Hey, get a car.
Hi, and welcome back to the Dial Podcast. I'm Jake Von Turing, and I'm here with Matt Legrand.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen of the internet? You guys are looking good. And particularly good, looking good today. I mean, I don't know. You guys seem to look good every week, but this week in particular.
No matter what time of day you're watching this either. Because people could be listening to this at different days.
Yeah.
So
Or-
all the days of this week, they're looking good.
And late at night.
Maybe.
To his left, Evan Price.
What's everybody drinking today?
Ooh, we got a plethora of drinks on the table here. So our sponsor, Kirkland Sparkling Water. I brought 3 of these today. We got a lemon and a lime.
Kirkland hasn't really adjusted their recipe lately, have they?
They're going to probably
get-
hold tight to that recipe. And then I'm
so.
also drinking a Ditaza gourmet coffee. Thanks to whoever purchased this.
Guatemalan, you're right, yeah.
Yep.
I went there and got it myself.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Brought one for Matt, but not for me.
I know. I was going to bring one for Jake, but Jake sometimes takes some break. It's not that he takes breaks from coffee, but he likes like making his own coffee too, so I never know if I should get him one.
Had he'd asked, I would have said, "Nah, I'm fine."
That's
I
right,
actually
okay.
brewed extra coffee just for today in case you guys wanted
Did
some. So there will be refills for
Well,
it.
I lost the cyclocross worlds to Matt, so I owed him a coffee anyway.
Yeah, we should talk about that.
And we will in just a minute.
Yep.
On Skype, Lance Hepler.
Hey, it's Lance Romance. I am on location today, coming at you from southern Utah. I am driving through St. George, Utah at the moment on my way to warmer climates for a few days.
A lot of old people like warmer climates. Is that right, Lance?
Snowbird.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is
it's
it
all
like
old
six?
people here.
Is it like 62 there? So is it just a little bit too cold? You got to go a little bit more south. That's just too chilly.
I drove from the Salt Lake area today, and it has been a massive snowstorm for the
boy.
last 4 hours.
Can't
Oh,
stay
wow.
there. Can't stay there then.
Yeah, it's been a little ugly. And St. George, as we crested over or came out of the canyon, there's blue sky here, but it's still only like 32 degrees. So
Still too cold.
Wasn't too far off that here
Yeah.
this morning. It was
cold.
It was cold, and we woke up to a little dusting of snow, and the kids got a 2-hour late start.
Yeah, I was surprised.
Yeah. Got that phone call at 6 o'clock. I'm like, whoa, what's going on?
Lance, where are you going? Where would you say you're going?
I was going to spend the day in St. George here, try to get some miles on the bike here, and then I'm headed to Mesa, Arizona for the next week or so.
Okay.
My wife is flying to Phoenix, and I'm going to pick her up from the airport there, and we were going to spend a week together in the Phoenix area.
Do you have a sister-in-law there? Is that right?
My sister actually
Your
lives
sister,
in
okay.
Mesa,
Yeah, I can't
so
remember.
we were going to kind of base camp at her place, but I've got the van and the dog, and so,
Party on wheels.
I'm just having fun. I was just looking for some warmer weather to get some miles in, so that's what I'm doing.
I saw you were on the trainer yesterday. Was it, Lance?
I was, yes.
It looked like you were in somebody's garage. Did you
I think I
break?
saw like a boat in the
Did you
background or
break
something.
into somebody's house and just decide you were going to ride the trainer in their garage?
No,
or
I spent the last few days in near Ogden, Utah, at my buddy's house. My college buddies, we get together to watch Super Bowl, and so I was at a Super Bowl party all weekend with my buddies, and so
We should just roll this right into his back pedal.
So then during the
Yeah,
game,
maybe.
during the
Just keep
game, I
going.
assume you were just riding your bike then, right?
No, it was before the game. I had
good.
a couple of free hours, and I was trying to get my workout in, and it was like 12 degrees outside. So I set my trainer up in the garage and did my workout there. It was quite fun. All my buddies came out and gathered around me and cheered me on as I was sweating on the trainer. So it was quite embarrassing and hilarious all at the same time.
Gotcha.
It's the first time I've ever actually done a trainer workout, and my feet actually went numb because
Oh, because it's like, what, 20 degrees
20
maybe
degrees
in the garage?
Ah,
Oh,
Yeah.
my gosh.
So
Hey, well, at least you weren't at least sweating puddles, right?
I was hardly sweating at all because it was so cold, but
why
I
don't
did
you
get the workout done.
round out the rest of this with your back pedal? What else happened?
Let's see. I did a lot of workouts on the trainer this week. I got out a couple of times outside. I put in about 19 hours this week, so I still put in a fair amount of hours and like 350 miles, with the stuff I did outside and on the trainer. And I'm just trying to build my base so that I can hang with some of you skinnier guys out there this year.
Dude,
So
that is quite the base. I don't think you're just going to be hanging with us. We're going to be very, very frightened of you if you continue 19 hours a week.
Training camp's going to look like a recovery week for this guy.
Seriously.
it might be. That's the idea, is just try to make everybody suffer and be jealous as much as possible.
There you go.
So
Awesome.
that's mostly what I did. I don't think I did anything really that extraordinary this week, other than just a lot of trainer miles and a lot of training workouts. I did do one specific workout that was very hard. It was 4 by 20 minutes at 93%.
I'm
of
looking at that
my
right now.
FTP.
Oh, my God, Lance, that's 4 by 20 minutes at 92%?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, but his 92% is like off the FTP. Your FTP is off
yeah,
anyway.
your
so.
FTP's way higher than what you actually
Right.
tested at.
So
yeah.
I'm going to call baloney on
I'm
that
calling
one.
baloney too. Yeah.
Well, it didn't feel like baloney on that fourth set,
Well,
that's for sure.
You should just be thanking your stars that your FTP is slightly off of.
Also, on the 30th, Lance posted a picture of himself, an older picture. Circa what year, Lance, was this picture from?
I want to say that was about 6 years ago and about
6.
70 pounds heavier.
Yeah.
So
I will
there's
tell
been
you
a
what.
bit of a transformation.
You are still a strikingly good-looking guy in this picture, but you have a little bit more facial hair now. In the picture below, quite a bit more facial hair, actually.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
We lose.
There's a Lance inside of that Lance from 6 years ago somehow.
Awesome.
I think are you guys? Am I cutting in and out?
You were for a second,
I think
but
you
you're
just
back
came
now.
back, yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So yeah.
All right. Well,
kind of here and there.
Are we going to hear about the shaving stuff or waxing?
Yes.
oh, did that happen?
We have to hear about that.
Oh yeah, I did get my legs waxed by a very unprofessional person this year.
Uh-oh.
I hope he or she was very unprofessional.
We couldn't find somebody. We couldn't get somebody to come to the house to do it, and
Yeah,
so
that'd be
we
scary.
ended up getting all the stuff. Well, no, we tried.
I know.
We had like 4 different people lined up, and they all bailed on us.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I'd bail too.
So yeah, so we ended up finding the equipment, and one of my
The
buddies,
equipment.
his wife did it for us.
Oh, my gosh.
Lance,
She-
I would have done it for you.
She really didn't know what she was doing. She tried really hard, but it was a little more torturous than it has
How
been
much
in
blood
years
did you see?
past.
Oh,
I didn't bleed at all. She didn't make me bleed.
then
But
she did well. Let's just give her a
It
round of
wasn't-
applause.
My wife, many, many moons ago, like we were, I don't even think we were married yet. She had like a home waxing kit. I'm like, does that work really well? She's like, yeah, your hair doesn't grow back for quite some time. And at the time I like shaved my arms or something like that, but they were getting long. And she's like, yeah, let me do it to your arms. And she put it on there, just did one
Strip?
one strip. She pulled it off and it pulled all the hair out and it pulled out even more than that, and
Most
the
of your
follicles
skin.
started to bleed. I was like, "You're never gonna do that again." That was. I like watched the rest of it off. I'm like, "Nope, you stay away."
That is awesome.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right,
I didn't bleed at all. I guess the hair is pretty it's pretty fine on my legs because I don't know, for whatever reason it just is. So I survived it.
We need to play a bit back to where Lance, you were so adamant about not shaving. Well, not that long ago. It really was. What was it, like last year? This
About
time?
a year, yeah,
Last
just
year.
before
Yeah.
he had his.
I was anti-shave last year, yes,
Yeah.
and now I'm shaved up to my nether regions.
Oh boy, Lance, no pants.
Man, your buddy must be very comfortable with you to allow that to happen.
They only did my lower legs, but then I had to go fix it in the bathtub.
That's a great question. Is how I know cyclists generally do not shave up as high as triathletes do.
Oh really?
I bet if you took an average.
We should. I don't know.
Oh, we should average that. Yeah, that would be a
don't know.
comfortable thing to average on our Facebook page.
I don't. That's
How
one of those
high is
questions.
appropriate? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next part of this backpedal.
Evan,
Exactly.
I was really enjoying that, Jake. I don't know.
Evan, why don't you backpedal for us?
This last week was a good week. I'm running a lot of miles and I'm doing a lot of intervals on the trainer. I did not make it outside this last week.
On the bike.
No, it was a lot of indoor training. I did another Zwift race, which was fun, and I learned that breaking away in a Zwift race on the Richmond course is equivalent to what I would think the hour record power is.
Is the Richmond course the worst course on Zwift?
It's basically a
Is it? I
flat,
don't-
just
Yeah. It
put
is?
out your
Ugh.
FTP until you hit that last cobbled hill, and then it's like 45 seconds all out, and then the group's already formed, and it's just a dead
I used to live in
finish.
Richmond, Virginia.
Really?
And so you can kind of recognize some of the roads and stuff like that. And it's,
Where is that cobbled climb? Like, do you know where that
I don't
is?
know. Well, I think you're like going under some bridges and down to the downtown area.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But I don't
Gotcha.
know. I mean, I know it's like a legit course because they
Yeah.
based it on the World Championship course from
Yeah,
a couple
It
years
was-
ago.
It was an awesome race. That World Championship course was very cool to watch. So yeah.
But for
city.
Zwift, Richmond's the worst.
Yeah, I like London a little bit better, but that's okay.
Really?
And
Okay.
so outside of that, I this weekend helped a friend move into Bellingham, Washington, which everybody at this table knows where Bellingham is, but Bellingham is
International
like
listeners.
yeah. So Bellingham is north of Seattle, and you are encroaching upon Canada at that point. You're getting close to Canada when
You
you're
have
in
to
Bellingham.
speak Canadian.
You do. Everybody starts throwing A's around quite a bit.
That's dangerous.
People live in the woods there, which is what I picture everybody in Canada does too. I just picture everybody lives in the woods. So
They ride horses.
I think so. I'm pretty sure, and eat nothing but syrup. But this house is like really in the woods, which was awesome. But it was interesting because every driveway is really on a slant. So I had to be really good at pulling my car in backwards there because it was like going up a 40% grade, backwards, which I don't derive upgrades like that very frequently. But outside that, it was fun.
Ride upgrades, don't buy upgrades.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eddie.
That's important. I just figured I'd throw some wisdom your way. Right
2020, Matt LeGrand. Yeah. Nobody said that before, though.
there. Never been heard before.
But yeah, we helped her move in, which was a blast. And then we had to make it back for the Lakeside Long Run, though, Sunday mornings.
Most
I will
important.
not miss that.
Most important run of the week.
So we woke up very early the next morning and drove back to
And
make
you were
it on the dot.
right on time.
Like, I mean, when I say we somehow timed that down to the second, I literally pulled in at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
And I look at my Garmin watch when I'm pulling, too, because I always want to make sure I'm not late. And it's like 9:59 and 30 seconds, and I'm coming down the hill. I'm like, I'm going to be late. Right in at 10. Like, pulled into the slot at 10
I
a.m.
had already told the group, I was like, a lot of new people here today, but we're gonna wait for this guy Evan. He's gonna be here. He'll be here in the next 10 minutes.
Yeah, we had a blast of a group there, though. That was a
was
lot
nice.
of fun. Yep.
That was
So
nice.
the posted time is 10 o'clock. Is that what time you're
Yes.
supposed to show up? Is that what time the run starts?
I like to show up at like 9:50, so Matt shows up before I do.
We like to. No, I don't. I think
thought
we
you usually do.
Somewhere in that kind of 10-minute range. But posted time is run at 10 o'clock. We leave at 10:05.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually usually chat for a
Which I
little
think is important because I do inevitably everyone shows up a bit. Not everyone shows up. A couple people will show up late, and I don't want to leave anyone behind. There's a number of people that
We had
are
a-
happy being late and catching up to the group.
Yeah.
We
We had a very big group this time around, too. And also, there's just the people that maybe start a little bit earlier out there, but we see them on the trail anyway, and everybody says hi and talks. It's just like basically a social party on a Heritage Trail on Sunday morning. It's fun.
It's definitely fun.
Yeah, dogs are welcome.
Cool.
I get very happy when people bring dogs. That's really the only reason I go is to see dogs.
There's
like,
always
people are fine,
a plethora of dogs on that trail
it's
anyway. So
incredible.
yeah.
So many golden retrievers.
Yeah,
It's the best dog.
Dude,
It's the best
we
dog.
saw this dog. We were
yes.
right at about 2 miles, and this dog comes running along the straightaway, and it has a tree in its mouth, like huge.
Yes.
And it was just, and you could just tell the dog was like, look at the size of this stick, just smiling like
proud
ear
of
to
himself.
ear.
Awesome story about
boy.
that.
Yeah.
Cassie talked to. They said the dog carried that stick for 6 miles.
Oh my gosh,
That's commitment.
it was just
Everybody should be like that dog in 2020. Carry the stick 6 miles.
It was
There
it
you
was
go. Just,
a happy dog. Just like look at the size of this.
it was a very heavy. It was just a massive log.
Yep.
Awesome.
Good job, dog.
Matt, back pedal.
I didn't bike that much this week. I did swim a fair amount. Typically, when for whatever reason, if there's like where I swim, there's an indoor pool and an outdoor pool. When the outdoor pool is closed for whatever reason, and right now it's because there's a heater broken, I tend to swim less because I don't want to go swim in the indoor pool. So I swim a little bit less because they're having some mechanical issues. But I did run a fair amount, just like Evan mentioned.
You ran more than a fair amount. I mean, you made it 10 miles.
We did 10 miles yesterday on our Lakeside Long Run, and that's probably the best I felt. My gut feeling is that we went a little bit slower than we did the week before.
We were actually clipping along pretty well.
We did okay.
Surprisingly, we were clipping.
Yeah, we did okay. And it was just like the best run, right?
Yeah.
Because as I'm finishing, I'm still feeling decent, and I'm like, and I can run 10 miles again. Like that is just the best.
Yeah.
Like it's
There's
my
no
favorite thing to
better
do. And for when you can't do something for so long, and then you're able to automatically, all of a sudden, basically, not all of a sudden, but over a couple weeks, like
Yeah, it feels
again.
like all of a sudden again. Yeah.
You're like, oh, thank God. Thank God I can go for a run. So
That's the best part of the back pedal right there. This was an awesome week because Matt's like back to doing what you like to do.
Yep.
Again.
and my
which is
heart rate
awesome.
was high, but that's okay.
We were talking.
We
about
were.
that.
It was conversational.
We basically went through all of running history over the last 40
We did.
years
we did
in one run.
and we were
Yeah.
running with this guy named Chris Brannon.
Brandon.
And he was
He's a
like,
mountain biker too.
he was. We were kind of like as far out as you can go. And he was like, hey, let's chill out for just a minute. And I was like, cool. And I was like, my heart rate's a little bit high anyway. He was like, what's your heart rate? And I was like, 160. And he was like, oh, mine's 140. That's why. And I wanted to get my heart rate down a little bit. And I'm like, oh man, my heart rate's just through the roof.
Yeah.
So
he was a champ for sticking with us. We were like, hey, we're gonna rub the mountain or Union High School. He's like, all right, I'll go with you guys.
Yeah, he was.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep. That was our weekend.
It was a great week.
Right on.
Jake?
Backpedal real
You got
quick.
anything for us?
Like everybody else, nothing special. A bunch of indoor trainer rides. Got to ride with the team, which was fun, and did the juniors ride. Our juniors are now doing rides on Thursdays and Sundays.
Sunday, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So looks like we just lost Lance, but oh well. And then I did get a 3-hour gravel ride, an almost 3-hour gravel ride in yesterday, which was really nice. Yeah, about just over 40 miles.
Did you just kind of go on your own?
Yeah.
And did you go out Washougal Dyke Trail or something?
Yeah,
or?
yeah, I did that again.
That's your go-to thing?
That's kind of been the go-to, and it's just kind of I know
love
what to
that Dyke
expect,
Trail,
and I just
yeah.
wanted to hold certain watts for about almost 3 hours, and worked out pretty slick. So I need to start venturing out, though, and finding more gravel around here that's in close proximity to us, and there's stuff up on Livingston.
Large
But,
and Livingston are the two coolest
yeah,
parts. Yeah.
and I half thought about going up there for a second, but Evan and I were talking about this before the podcast. Like there was like this horseshoe of like clouds that just looked
That's not
really
where you
like
want to get stuck in
intimidating.
bad weather. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you get up to Livingston, it snows up there, and I didn't want to be up there riding in the snow by myself on a gravel
I told you a
road.
couple weeks ago when I got chased down Larch by hail.
Yeah.
I literally was running
Yeah,
away from
yeah.
Larch. So
I mean, we had some finicky weather the past few days. I know on Saturday there was a
beautiful
point in time
weather,
where
and not beautiful weather.
it was like
Yeah.
40 degrees, rain was coming down sideways, then all of a sudden it turned into hail, and it was just like crazy winds, and it was pretty nuts. But yesterday was a nice day. I mean, it was cold, but for my ride, it was always pretty much blue skies, which was
I
beautiful.
think we're on that like edge of like winter's holding on by its nails, and it's like aggressively like trying to hold on, and then spring's like trying to shove its way in, and it's
I
just
feel like we should have a couple more weeks of winter, but we'll see.
We will. It's
Yeah.
that's just the pressure changing. That come through here through the Columbia River Gorge. We'll get these little pockets of like storm cells that'll fly through, and temperatures all over the map. I mean, it was like almost 60 degrees last week.
yeah. Like
my
Wednesday
kids
of last
were
week,
like,
yeah.
"Dad, can I wear shorts to school?" I'm like, "Yeah." And
was
then all of a sudden
warm.
this morning
Yeah.
there's
It was cold,
snow on the
yeah.
ground. So yeah. So, but
Winter's not letting go yet.
yeah, 2 weeks in a row of going over 10 hours.
There
Oh,
you
good
go.
job.
I was about
Nice
to say
work.
that. I was looking at everybody's Strava here, and
Yeah.
Lance is riding lots, and so is Jake.
I'm nowhere close to Lance in his 19 hours and Evan in his 47 hours.
a little bit less than 47. But
It's coming around. So, yeah, let's jump into some lead out news. Was there like
there
a
was actually a
cyclocross
race we can
or something
actually
like that
talk
this weekend?
about.
There might have been.
Yeah, a YouTubeable worthy full race. Well, I'll say the women's race is worth the women's elite race is worth everybody going on and watching that full race.
I didn't see it.
That was the one that I actually watched. I watched the highlights from the men's race.
Yeah.
It was a bummer because a lot of us tuned in to watch a local, Claire Hunsinger,
Yeah.
and she had looked like a mechanical spill or something like that in the
You were
first
saying
lap.
pretty early, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was the first lap, and she ended up DNFing. So,
Mm-hmm.
but that race was still pretty good. Do you want to give us a rundown of how that finished up?
So how it finished up, and I'm going to get the names right. It was so the Dutch women who were 1 and 2 have been going at it this season. So
Yeah.
Alvarado, correct, and Worst were the two women. Worst has gotten the better of Alvarado most of this season.
Yeah.
And so the finish is actually a pretty cool finish because it comes down. They came down a pretty steep descent into a hard left-hand turn.
Yep.
And Alvarado played it very well that she stayed on her bike on that descent. Because if you want, like, it's hard to get an appreciation for how steep those descents are until you watch how hard the elites hit those and how fast they go down them. Like, that descent straight to that left-hand turn, anybody at this table outside of, like, maybe Jake at his absolute best mountain biking ability, I would for sure eat it down that hill.
Oh, man.
There'd be no way I'd be making it down upright down
I would
that hill.
trip walking my bike.
Oh,
And
I would make it to
even
the lip of the hill.
If I was looking at the hill, walking my bike somewhere, then I'd fall down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they hit the left-hand turn, and Worst has the lead. Looks like she's going to, like, lay it down.
Yeah.
Starts to lay it down. Alvarado gets in the draft and slings around her, and I mean, it's like, that classic.
Worst tried to like out sprint her for a
and
second,
then just blew up. You could see, you could see it on her face. Her head goes down. She stops pedaling about 50 meters from the finish. But that race was an awesome finish because there were 3 Dutch women who were just going at it for the last 2 laps. I think I'd have to look again back at it, but a good portion of the end of the race, just back and forth, back and forth.
Yep.
Right behind those 3 Dutch women was Compton, the
Katie
best.
Epton Compton.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome job. I mean, I think the heart of the race was those 3 Dutch women, but just off the camera, usually you see the Katie Compton had a great race. So, also another American, Becca Faringer, a friend of mine from a long time ago, but she was 13th,
Correct.
which is
Yep.
awesome. That's just so cool to see how far Becca's come because Becca, I think, has the potential also to be right up there with Clara and Katie.
Yeah.
But the American core for women is awesome.
Yep.
Those are 3 great racers.
American women are doing well.
Yeah.
So, real quick though, I think this was the first time they've done this. They added the juniors category, correct? They normally
think
have.
so, yeah.
I think
Do
this
they
was the
have under
first
23
year.
for women? Is that
Well,
what you're
there's
saying?
under 23, but there's a
They always
juniors
have the
category now.
U23, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and
I actually think Alvarado's young. She could have raced the
Exactly.
U23,
Yeah.
which is becoming more and more common in cyclocross. Like, you look at the top 10, there's a lot of young people in there.
Yeah, if you've
Like,
got
a lot of 90s birthdays.
the prowess to race with
Late
the big
90s,
kids, then, do it. But for the juniors and the girls or women's category, the U.S. found their way to the podium. Is it Magdigan Monroe? Is it? I believe that's her name. She got 3rd place.
That's awesome.
So she was fun to watch.
The only American on the podium then.
Yeah, she was fun
At
to watch in the
Cyclocross World.
U.S. Nationals, and she was a strong, fast little whip of a girl. So
Yeah.
that was cool.
The cross core that they're building for the women in the U.S. is going to be is hopefully going to be special to watch over the next.
Does
5 to
that
10
seem
years.
like it's predominantly in the New England area, or I'm wondering where these?
great
I'm wondering
question.
where these.
Well, Colorado has
Right.
produced a few, I believe.
They've got a huge juniors program in Colorado. I can't
Yeah.
remember the name of it, but there's 400 plus kids in that program alone.
But like the Northeast and Midwest have great cyclocross racing seasons.
Yeah.
So like Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky have great racing circuit. I know the East Coast does too.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's pockets of it, but I feel
Just
like it's kind of
pockets of
all
it,
over.
different
You know, I
places.
mean, yeah. I'm sure if you looked at like parts of the Southwest too, I'm sure there's a few pockets.
I have no
out
idea.
there.
Hopefully that continues to grow. I personally feel like there's a decline in cyclocross in the United States, especially when you start looking at certain bicycle manufacturers who are just like stopping the process of making cyclocross bikes.
Jump on the gravel train.
That tells you, that tells you like the numbers. They're just not panning out for some of these manufacturers. So.
It's a shame because it's really exciting racing to watch. It's cool.
It is. It's really actually
Being somebody who does not race it.
In
I
a lot
enjoy
of
watching
ways,
it. Yeah.
in a lot of ways, it's a better spectating sport than road cycling.
Definitely.
I mean, we all get into road cycling for sure because I don't know. There's big races, but it's. I mean, it's a long. You're talking about like, well, gotta watch this for 3 weeks.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? It's like cyclocross. It's like here's an hour.
Here's the 5th stage. What are they doing today? Oh, they're hanging in the pack. All right. Here we go.
Exactly. Any surprises in the men's elite category?
So I would say no.
No.
It was just
Woot tried hard.
so.
I only watched the highlights. I
I
still need to
think-
watch the whole men's race.
So it was interesting. I think 2 podcasts ago, we all sat around and we kind of said, this is going to be an awesome race to watch. All of us thought Matthew Vanderpool was gonna
When? Yeah.
win. He was the guy to beat. And we were right. I mean, I think everyone kind of saw that coming. What I thought was interesting only was, the conditions didn't favor him because they were, muddy and things like that. And he still dominated so severely that it really made for not an interesting race at the front end. He, from what I could see, and I'm going to make up some numbers, after the first lap, he was clear of the field. By the start of this, really into that second lap, he had like a minute on the field, and those numbers are not correct, but that's what it seemed like.
He is the
and that was it.
strongest cyclist in the world.
Yeah,
And that was it. I mean, it was
his
just
race to lose.
We're-
Yeah.
and they rode 6 or 7 laps, I think.
I really think we're witnessing like the next like Eddie Merckx type. I mean, he's still very young. Give him a few years. I bet he's going to try a Grand Tour at some point.
Well, we'll see.
He's a guy who's across the board in many
Yeah.
different races, just dominant.
Woot is kind of the same
Yep.
way in the same vein. I mean,
Yeah.
how many world championships did Woot win? Was it 3?
2 or 3.
2 or 3?
Yeah,
And
He
that was
young. He
MVP's
was like,
third
he was like
one,
19
correct?
when he won his first, right?
Something like that.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. But MVP, this was his third.
Yes, I think
So,
so.
I mean, they're kind of
I thought it was
almost cut from the same
second, yeah.
cloth. And
Was it?
Yes,
second.
they seem like it.
Yeah.
It seems like those are the 2 names to talk about.
yeah, and they're fun to watch in the road racing stuff too. They've got
Yes,
a
they
lot
are.
of potential to do a lot of great
and
stuff
they
in
are.
that scene.
I mean, Woot's 26 and Vanderpool's 25. I want to say. I mean, I know
they're
they're
both
only
young.
a year apart.
Yeah.
They're
I think
only-
it's going to be the classics, the spring classics,
Yeah.
which I think are going to be really neat to watch those guys and see
That's going to
what
be
they can
so
do.
cool for the classics to become like
Yep.
the most exciting thing on the calendar
Yeah.
again. Which, in my opinion, they will be going into this year. It's going to be so fun to watch.
They've always been some of the best races to watch.
Yeah,
It's
but I
just-
think we got some really cool young characters
Coming
now
through.
that are fun to watch. But yeah, so we were mentioning this too. Is second place
Right.
was a very young.
it's
God, this kid's 21.
His name's like Picard or
out of the
something
UK,
like that.
Piddock, Thomas
Piddock.
Piddock.
Okay,
He's
yeah.
from the UK, which is classically not incredibly strong at cyclocross, but had a great showing at Worlds.
Right.
So here's the interesting thing for me is I'm thinking about when the UK really got into track cycling and started to dominate track cycling for a period going into the London Olympics. I would love to see the UK throw its immense cycling power behind a great cyclocross team and come in and like try to dethrone the Dutch and the Belgians.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah. I'd love to see the US do it from the men's side, but
It seems
I
like
feel
we
like
don't
the
have
US
same,
women's has a better chance of cracking
it
into
also
that
seems
group.
like they're more organized than we are.
Yes.
That's
the
just
UK
my-
is very organized
That's my
cycling-wise.
gut feeling is
Yeah.
that like we have talent, we've got all this stuff, but like we're sporadic and we have people here and people there. The one of the things that I thought was interesting, well, for one, that was cool to see him. It looked like he was fading, and then he held on and got second place, which was great. He's a young guy, 22.
21. I think he was born in 1999.
So he
I
could've-
assume he may be 21, 22.
We could probably assume that he would have won the under 23s had he chosen to race that race.
Yeah. Same
So,
thing with Alvarado from the Dutch. You could just assume that first and second place from the men's and women's is probably going to win the U23.
I applaud him for stepping up and be like, I'm going to race.
Yeah,
I'm
that
going to
takes
race the
guts.
elite group because he could have won somewhere else and
Yep.
he stepped it up and like went for. I mean, obviously, I think the silver medal is better than
winning
a
U23, absolutely.
And I think
Yeah.
anyone that pays attention probably thinks the same. But sometimes people, it's like the gold is it. That's it.
Yep.
So good on you
win.
for
Win,
doing
win,
that.
win. Yeah.
Going for the harder race, choosing
Yep.
that. The race that I thought was the most interesting was watching Wout van Aert because he's coming back from that crazy time trial crash.
Yeah, that laceration really kicked his backside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And we took bets on that one. And, like Lance, who probably pays the closest attention to cyclocross, thought that he would be 10th. Like,
Yeah.
And so for him to get 4th place just shows like, hey, this guy knows how to race cyclocross, obviously, has a ton of talent, and has a ton of heart, right? Because his training wasn't 100%.
No.
There's no way it could have been, right? Because he's like in bed for
He's
90
coming
days
back.
or however long it was that his quad was lacerated.
Yeah.
So
Who do you guys think win? Now, this is obviously just a huge hypothetical question. If he doesn't go down in that time trial, who wins MVP or Woot this year in Worlds?
at cyclocross,
Yeah.
Matthew Van Aert for sure.
You think
Matthew
so?
Van Aert.
I'm sorry, Matthew Vanderpool.
That's a so much better answer. You're like, oh no, yeah.
Yeah.
Wout Vanderpool wins.
Wout Vanderpool. Matthew Van Aert.
Just call him MVP. I would agree with Matt on that.
MVP still wins.
I
Okay.
think
he
right
is-
now his
he
engine
is
is
so
just nuts.
solid.
I mean,
So-
from what the 4-minute highlight showed me, it wasn't a close race. So,
Right. Well,
but also I think that course, and I could be wrong here, it seemed like it favored MVP. It was a very athletic course. Like you needed to be a good athlete on that course. There was a billion of those little spike hills where it's like 40% climb, up, down, descend like your life depends on it, and then flat for a little bit, and then the same thing again.
I wonder if that course like benefited
flat
someone that
otherwise.
would be like little, like the British guy.
Explosive. Like I
Like-
think you need to be small and explosive on that course. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
He was going to win on anything. It didn't matter.
I think Vanderpool. I think it probably didn't favor him. I just think he was just that much better. I literally think he could have not tapered or anything. It's just no. He's got that
30-hour
race.
training week, still going to win Worlds. Yeah.
And you know what?
He's getting ready for the Classic, so he doesn't care.
I think this was him as he finished, got off his bike, did like the hey, look at this bike, and then crossed the line. Like he just.
Did he then like go and grab his road bike and his coach was like, hey, 3 by 20 minutes, 3 by 20. He's like, okay, got to go train. Classics are in a couple months.
It looked like he was quite comfortable. He did. He switched out his bike in the last lap to get a clean bike to go to take to the finish line, and then he like
Sponsors want a clean bike.
then he got off the bike, showed it off like this,
Uh-huh.
and then hopped back on and crossed the line.
Ah, good.
It was like,
Yeah.
okay. I don't know what I think about that. But
They like model his apparel too. He was like, oh, I need to make sure I show the sponsors.
no, he had
and
he had
walk
plenty of
across the line.
he had time to like change clothes, take a shower, and make sure he looked. Yeah, no, he
Made it the Dutch flag and then wore it around him.
He was quite muddy when he finished, but man, okay. So another thing that I was thinking, like, so he rides a canyon bike.
Yep.
The top triathletes in the world are riding canyon bikes. That company is doing okay.
And the next question is Matthew Vanderpool going to race triathlon next?
Yeah, probably.
I just made up that news.
Yeah, you heard it here first.
Yeah. Oh, you should make a YouTube clickbait video. Matthew Vanderpool racing triathlon?
What?
Question mark? And then just say, no, he's probably not going to. But I just wanted you to click on this video.
Yeah, that's good.
That canyon,
clickbait right
that's
there.
actually a good question. I sometimes wonder about that. You think about the big giant machine that is specialized, and they've got
right.
every Tom, Dick, and Harry riding on their bikes, and it's
I'm
because
Tom, yeah.
they've got the biggest budget. I mean,
Yeah.
they're the biggest bicycle manufacturing company on the planet, and they've got a lot of money to throw around, and they've got the ability to put a lot of people on bikes. Canyon hasn't been around for terribly long.
Yeah.
But they've got a model that's different from everybody, and obviously that's working
I
for
think
them.
it
And
is.
there's a lot of money that they're able to keep
Yep.
in their coffers, and I think that they've got a lot of ability to go out and find these top tiered athletes and sponsor them.
I mean,
So
Jan Frodeno rides a canyon.
Yeah.
You look at the best in these sports are riding their bikes.
So it just is that the best bike, or is it just because they've got
that's
the
a good
money
question.
to put that person on the bike and make it worth their while
I
financially
think they're
speaking?
great bikes.
Here's what I mean. I don't think we know because I haven't spent time riding them. But I think if you're a pro athlete, you're not going to ride a bike that's really bad. But as long as it's competitive,
Yeah.
you're going to take whatever the biggest paycheck is.
Yeah, yeah.
Unless,
if it's
unless you're a
within
triathlete.
a
And in the
certain-
past, we've seen some great triathletes ride terrible bikes.
We have, but like
Not as much anymore.
the
I will say
classic-
that's changing now.
the classic
That's changing.
story is like Crowe, had like
Yeah.
a really bad. I don't remember what bike
And
he was
switched on
on.
to Specialized.
He switched over because he was just like, I can't ride this thing anymore. It's a
Was he on
disadvantage.
was he on Orbea?
I think so.
I don't want to throw Orbea under the bus, but Orbea is the one that pops in my head when I think like you're riding a bad
I
bike.
can't
and now you
remember
can
what he
switch.
was riding, and I don't want to like throw a bike company underneath the bus or whatever.
Yeah.
But he switched, and then he dropped 14 minutes or something, and they were
Yeah.
like, "Look at this specialized shit."
His training had nothing to do with that
Yeah,
either.
who knows?
Yeah.
Right.
Rowan Dennis. I mean, that's
Yep.
another perfect
Yep.
example.
That's
of
another
the
great
Meridia that he was
example.
riding on, and he couldn't stand the bike and just
He was vocal about that too. Yeah.
World Championships last year, he rode on a BMC that had all of the badging stripped off of it just so he could go out there and be competitive. So
Yep.
he's riding on Specialized now, though.
Is he?
Go figure. Well, it's because of the team he's on. He went over to.
Yep.
Well, no, I'm sorry. He's with Ineos, and he's riding on the Dogma now.
Oh, okay.
So sorry,
On the Pinarello. Yeah.
Pinarello. Yeah.
Another great bike company. Pinarello and Canyon are the two that I look at, and it's like people who kind of know what they're looking for and have the money to spend.
Pinarello is just that's an expensive bike.
I know, but like
I kinda
people who
disagree
know
with you
how to
on that
spend
one.
it really, because I think like the people who I'm seeing a lot of people buy Canyons and Pinarellos.
I look at Pinarello and I think these are the people that have disposable income to throw around, and they want that kind of like
panache.
yeah. And for Canyon, I think of them as like these are people potentially looking for that slight discount. So I think they're very, very different groups of people.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong.
I just don't know too much about like the European dense bikes. Like, you know, the bikes that like when you see somebody over here riding, you're like, what is that? And they have to explain. It's like, oh, this is Italian made.
Yeah. It's like that Campagnolo, like look at like
camping parts. Yeah.
Camping parts is like this is the high end stuff you pay extra for it, and they rave about it because it's so great. But really, there's not that much difference.
Oh yeah, because our pulley wheel weighs 2 grams less than SRAM, so we're better.
Yeah. Crazy stuff.
Crazy bike toys.
Yeah. Go talk about that all day long. I had one other question for you. I don't know if we should talk about this because it kind of starts to fall into the vein of like the whole drug stuff.
Sure. I was gonna ask these. I don't know. If it's
I
the
don't
same
talk
question,
about doping on this podcast. I'm sorry.
but I was looking at that race and thinking like, how many of these people are on drugs? Like,
Yeah.
because I don't know. I think of cyclocross as potentially having a bit of a problem.
Yeah, potentially, but I mean, it's
they're drug
still
testing,
governed by the UCI, but
which means that there's probably a problem.
Exactly. I was reading an article about the Jumbo-Visma team, and did you guys see that come across?
see this.
About the use of the ketone supplements.
I've also got another little thing.
I heard that was very popular Peloton wide, not just
Yes.
Jumbo.
Well, the Dutch anti-doping authority is very uncomfortable with Jumbo-Visma's use of this. So I'd imagine if they're using it, just about everybody is. So it's just like little things like that. They just keep coming up, and it's like, what are they else? So because if you look at Jumbo's team, they're stacked and they're fast, and they're going to be crazy hard to contend with for
arguably the best team.
I think they are the best.
Ineos
team.
is not going to be a slouch of a team.
I still think
but I think that they're doing stuff too. So
Well, so this is one of those pieces where it's like, this is not illegal. There's clear benefits to it.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you're not doing it, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage.
Doping is just getting smarter and smarter and smarter
But
as
is
the
this
rules
doping?
get more and more strict.
It's not breaking the rules. I don't think it's doping.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I mean, you could look.
Is drinking this coffee doping? It's within the rules.
Caffeine.
We know that
improves
caffeine is
performance.
a.
You're right.
caffeine.
What's the difference between that and a ketone?
Well, let's save this for
obviously there's
another
difference,
conversation.
But
I think that there's another topic
There's
here.
one more rumor that I'm just going to like drop off before we go into this one.
Uh-oh.
Now, this could just be tabloid stuff, but did you see Michele Ferrari has been linked back into activities in the professional cycling world? Look up this article.
I thought he was pretty much
I'll
done
give
and
you
like
one
blackballed.
guess. I'll give you a guess on one rider who he's been linked to. Astana rider. Shocking. Astana's involved with doping. I know. Yeah.
Nibali?
Fulgosong.
A Fulgosong.
Oh, that's too bad. People like.
And guess who had a wonderfully amazing last 2 years on the road and impressively was going through the spring classics and into the grand
Now
tours.
I've got.
I'm just
he's had some good races.
He's had some really good races.
But to
the
make
last
this
2
more
years.
interesting, did you notice that in the tour, Lance had picked him to win? Lance Armstrong, I'm talking about.
Insider info there or what?
This is
look
like
no, you're
the rumor
completely
mill.
right. Lance
Lance
again
had
and
picked him,
again said
and Lance
it.
was like, "I like this guy. I think he's going to be big." And I'm like, and
You
know,
don't think Lance and Ferrari are still talking? I'm sure. I'm
Who
sure
knows?
Ferrari's like, hey, guess who's going to kill it this year?
Yeah. Who knows? Who knows? That's some
Get some hot tips on his burger
Oh
phone.
yes,
big time speculation.
More of that to come this spring season. But
Ferrari, I think was last. I just saw something and they were like, he's still writing articles on his blog, and I was like, okay, that's
he's still
surprising.
active in the cycling world. It's just very hush hush. I think if you're working with him, yeah.
Oh yeah, you couldn't work with him.
Oh
and tell
no,
anyone.
you can on your Instagram be like taking a picture with Michele Ferrari.
Look who I
and be
hang
like,
out with.
Look who came to town.
Gosh, crazy.
How about we jump into our topic for the day?
Let's do it.
Aerodynamics in cycling.
That's important.
Wait,
Let's
in
talk-
cycling or triathlon?
Just that one component of triathlon. We'll talk about aerodynamics.
Only that component, though.
on the bicycle.
Aerodynamics
While riding a bicycle.
in running.
I don't want to talk about fluid dynamics in the water. I don't want to talk about running dynamics of your dolphin shorts.
Transition aerodynamics.
Those dolphin shorts are the best.
Make sure your aero when going through transition too.
Let's break this thing down though. Let's talk about the science and let's get into all the gear and all the other little nuances that go into bike riding and aerodynamics. I think that there's a lot of stuff that we can still impart. We've touched on this a bunch of times and we've talked about it in little bits and pieces, but I don't think we've done a full segment on aerodynamics relative to the sport of cycling.
Touched it a few times.
So there's a lot that I think that we can impart and share, and hopefully people can take some stuff away from this to make themselves a little bit faster. And there's a lot of little things, even kind of reading up on this a little bit before the show, I'm like, there's a lot of things here that just like your brand new person or your recreational cyclist can adapt to their riding regimen that can help them become more efficient on the bike. I think there's a lot of neat stuff.
I think the three of us, when we talk with each other, kind of take for granted that there are people that are, I'm not even sure if they're new to cycling. You know, maybe they've been biking for a couple years or whatever, but they just don't care or get it, like that how big aerodynamics is in cycling. You know, I'm thinking, you know, of like family friends and things like that are like, yeah, I love biking. You know, I go on my bike or whatever. And they're like, I bike, you know, the standard thing that I hear is like, I can bike 16 miles an hour or whatever it is. And I'm like, awesome. A lot of us that talk about cycling, we talk about, you know, wattage and things like that. And the reason is because if you're biking up a hill, miles per hour doesn't make any sense. If you're biking down a hill, it doesn't make any sense. Really, like power is kind of a thing that, you know, that we discuss. Aerodynamics is so important, you know, when it relates to like your power and how it kind of translates itself into that miles per hour that you guys are kind of obsessed about. And so there's so many little things that you can kind of add on. It's like 1, 2, 3, like you start adding all these little benefits up and they're compounding and it's just like, wow, all of a sudden you can drop a couple miles an hour. And so I think it's an important topic that people should take seriously. The other side of the coin is those of us, and I'm probably super guilty of this, of like sacrificing, like, well, I got my aerodynamics lined up. You're like, you've only trained once this week, buddy.
Got my position
dialed.
What
would really help your aerodynamics would be just biking harder,
20
buddy.
more watts.
Training a little bit. That would help you.
Yeah, there's a point in time though where you get to that level of fitness and like that's great. How can I get a little bit faster? And there's going to be a point in time too where you're going to go out and ride, and you know, if you're just looking to get some exercise in and you're looking for more of like time on the bike, you don't care about how fast you're going, just as long as you're getting your heart rate elevated, you're engaging your muscles, and you're going to be out there for a certain period of time. But there's probably going to become a point in time where like, all right, that was fun. Now I want to do an event. I want to get a little bit faster. How can I, you know, make this a little bit more, you know, competitive, or want to go out there and chase some Strava segments or get involved in some bike racing. That'd be fantastic. And this is where you can start to see some huge dividends that you can take advantage of said fitness.
And here's to anybody who's like thinking, God, I don't want to spend money on a new, you know, like aero frontal area, all this stuff. I don't have the money to spend for that. That's fine, because as we're going to talk about on here, it's your body position that is like, and I've heard numbers varying from 70 to 80% of your drag. I'm going to say 80%.
I was going to say the exact same number, 70 to 80% of the aerodynamic drag, which isn't the bike, it's your fat ass.
It's you,
right?
yeah. It's me and Matt's broad shoulders. we don't have broad shoulders. No. Anybody who's actually seen us in person, very, very not strong people. But this is where I think, imagine, okay, so somebody's like, look, I'm not trying to go fast. I just want to ride on a group ride. Yeah. Well, to make it through that whole group ride, if you can get a little bit more aero tucked, that group ride becomes a lot more fun. You're hanging with the group for 60 miles because you can hang in that group. Yeah. If you're on your own, you need to bridge. You can get yourself into a little bit more aero position to make that happen. So,
right,
it's fun stuff to look at.
We'll talk about this, but like drafting is aerodynamics, right?
It is
so
cycling.
It's like it is part of cycling. It is whether or not you can hang with the group or not. And I just see a lot of confusion with people just thinking like, oh, I'm not strong enough. Not really. You might be stronger than half the people riding in that group, but they know how to tuck in.
Exactly.
They know how to like stay slippery in the wind. They're not putting out more power than you. They're just riding more intelligently. I mean, that might not be the nicest thing or nicest way to say. Well, but there's an educational process too.
There's more experience with that, and this is where we're talking about the difference between always looking at wattage and riding fast. Yeah, riding fast, in my opinion, is. And I'll use an example from our own team because I keep on hearing people always talk about this, is Chris Antle.
Yep.
Chris Antle can get slippery in the wind. He can get small, he can get little, and also it helps that he has a massive engine. But, you know,
the way he tucks down, like I mean, you see him like get into this position, and you're like, hang on,
He's little in the wind.
please hang on, because I'm about to get dropped.
He's a terrible aero drag.
Yeah.
If he's on the front of the group, that's not the guy you want to be behind.
Yeah, but he'll do it. He'll put the hurt on you. Like you get a flat segment or something like that, and he'll just put the hurt on you.
He's a perfect example to talk about this with what we're talking about right now, and we can actually look at this from a simple number of like this is how many watts he put out for this period of time, and this is how many watts I personally put out over the same period of time. And we did the Jack Frost time trial last year.
Yep.
And I think he put out, it was just over 300 watts. Okay. Yep. And that was for the 29 minutes
for 20K, right?
For 20K. Yeah. 12.2 or 3 miles, whatever it is. He put out, there you go. Hey man, that last tenth of a mile, that tenth of a mile
matters, right? Yeah.
But during that same segment, like we're looking, like we had pretty much the same weather conditions. He put out 300, and I think it was like, we'll say like 10 watts.
Yep.
I went and did the exact same thing, and I beat him by just a few seconds, but I put out, I think it was about 45 or 50 more watts than he did over that same time period. And I barely beat him. So that's a perfect example of like being able to get in that aerodynamic position and having less of that frontal part of your body making contact with wind. And like you said, that 70 to 80%, that makes a big difference.
Slippery,
I think that the conventional number is 70%, but that makes a huge difference.
I think as a cyclist, the best compliment somebody can give you, and I've been lucky enough to receive this enough, and I don't get a lot of compliments in the cycling world, but it's that you're a terrible draft.
Oh yeah.
That's
I'm the exact opposite. Like, oh dude, you're like this big, huge moving landmass.
But Jake also is naturally very broad-shouldered and strong. I mean, you're looking at, it is certain body types, it is easier to get in those positions, but for the amount of watts that Jake puts out, you still get into a good aero position. You do.
I try.
Yeah.
It's not as good as it once was, but yeah.
But
yeah, go ahead.
So I know Matt was he's going to be the hard nerd on this with giving us like kind of what, and I know people have all heard these terms. Whenever you look at, YouTube, a video on aerodynamics, you're going to hear a couple of these terms get tossed around, like yaw angle, friction, drag, air density, frontal area, as Jake has just said. I'll let Matt go ahead and nerd out for a second on yaw angle, which is what he just explained to me.
Yeah, before we started, we were talking about yaw angle, and you'll hear this typically when some product is talking about how aerodynamic they are, right? So let's, you could take your phone, if you're listening to this on your phone, listen to the podcast or whatever it is, you put that in a wind tunnel, and what they do with the actual tunnel itself is, they'll take the product because it's easier to move the product, and they'll tilt it to different angles in the winds coming. So the wind's hitting it at somewhere between like a 0 angle, so that's head on. Typically they'll test to like -15 and 15. And so that's to simulate like the wind not coming straight to your face, is hitting you on the side. They don't do like a 90-degree angle. And the reason is because you're moving forward on the bike or whatever it is, like typically, or if they're testing an airplane, the airplane's moving forward. So those are yaw angles, and your aerodynamics actually change based on the yaw angle. So, and there's different products that handle yaw angles differently. Sometimes you can be extremely aerodynamic at like a 5 yaw angle degree, but horrible when you're, at 0%. That's not very standard, but could happen. And then there's some really crazy stuff, like certain wheels that are faster, like which you're getting like, you'll see this with like disc wheels and some deeper dish wheels and things like, you're actually getting like a negative effect. So the wind is pushing you forward.
Almost acting like a sail, correct?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. And so that's why a lot of the time trial bikes that you use in triathlon are not legal in UCI time trials, if I'm not mistaken, because of the fairings on the bikes, like the Felt IA, for instance, or that's that specialized. What's the name of the specialized?
The latest. They just call it a shiv.
X, right?
That's the Cervelo.
Oh, my bad. I'm thinking the Cervelo.
And there are certain Cervelos, like you can't have a certain fork up there because the fork.
Exactly, wider fork.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the UCI will be like, well, that's, anytime you have wider stuff on the front wheel or whatever, it's a little bit more dangerous. And there's this sail effect at certain yaw angles.
And that's based off of like your drag coefficient, right? So like if you make a foil, you have a lower drag coefficient, right?
So there's a lot to this, but I'm
way simplifying this for
but that's great.
me.
Simplifying is good. So CDA coefficient of drag area. Everyone forgets about the area, the A part, right? So if you have a very narrow area, like this is like get your elbows in, like frontal area,
Yep.
that's that A part. So that's a huge part of CDA, like your CDA number.
The actual area.
Then
like
there's
the physical area that you're
exactly.
taking.
Yeah. And so 90, percent of these companies, when they're talking about coefficient of drag, they're really talking about that coefficient of drag part, not coefficient of drag area. But the coefficient of drag part, as wind hits an object and it flies over it, the crazy part is as the wind comes off the object, if you have the standard like round tubes, that we like the old school bikes or whatever, it turns out that the dangerous part or the drag part is where the wind exits the tube, and basically you have these little like
they call them whirlies,
The
right?
vortex, right?
Is that literally what they call
vortex.
them, whirlies,
and
when
it's
they come off that?
Yeah, and so what it is, it's actually an area of low pressure, and that is it's huge drag. And so what they figured out a long time ago, right, when they made airplanes and all kinds of stuff, is that if you have like that teardrop shape, that smooths out. So this is actually adding, product to, you're adding more volume to the actual object to create this teardrop shape, but it's smoothing out that low pressure area, and it's so much faster, like dramatically faster, because you're reducing drag. So there is a lot to it. And then, of course, different yaw angles. If you can imagine like the wind coming from a different angle, that low pressure angle is going to be different, right? Because you've got that teardrop shape and it's in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
And so
I think
so
part of the yaw. I'm sorry, Evan.
Go ahead. Yaw
You're
angles.
good.
The yaw angle, part of that though has, I don't know if you mentioned this, is part of your directional travel of speed too. And that is a factor in here. So
absolutely,
an example of this would be like if you took a balloon and you tied it to a string, and you tied said string to say like the stem of your bike, and you let it go out a certain amount of feet, whatever, away from the bike. And if you're going really slow and you're getting a crosswind, it's going to blow the balloon farther out,
right?
Because that crosswind is pushing it out, and your speed isn't really having as much of an effect. But as you start to ramp your speed up, you're going to start to overcome that crosswind, and that balloon's going to pull in tighter, closing that angle down, decreasing that yaw angle. So a lot of this has to do with the speed that you're generating as a cyclist, in relationship to the crosswind that you're getting, so that you can kind of get a visual of what's going on there.
It's the speed of the wind plus your personal speed.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
So-
that's where that balloon is going to tell you the whole angle, because the faster you're going, the tighter it's going to pull in behind you, and the greater the wind is, the farther it's going to push that balloon away, so that you're finding that little happy medium of what's going on.
That's a great way to describe it. The funny thing is earlier I mentioned like they test between -15 and 15% yaw angles.
Yeah.
Turns out that's not that much of us at this table, and I'm not saying that we're like fast or slow or whatever, but most of the time your yaw angles are much tighter than that, like
5 to 10%,
or less, Really,
there's
like
a lot
2
of
to
bike
3%.
manufacturers that are starting to change the shape of their bikes based on the numbers that Matt's talking about. Like, for instance, like Felt just came out with their brand new AR bike, their Aero road bike, and they've changed it because of that exact same reason.
Because great at 15%, like you might be great, but like that doesn't matter. It's not worth adding extra shape to this bike for those super crazy yaw angles, because you never hit them, right? And so wheel manufacturers are looking at this also, and there's a lot of smart people.
And this is why, obviously, like climbing aerodynamics. Anybody who's ever gone up a steep climb tries to stay on somebody's wheel. You better be putting out pretty much the same exact wattage that they are. Way different when you're going 28 miles an hour in Vancouver Lake, our area where we like to flat time trial.
Yeah. So that's
that yaw angle way skinnies out at those speeds.
That's a great point. So this is, I have two sides to this. As you go slower, aerodynamics matter less. So and it's an exponential. The faster you go, the harder it is to overcome the aerodynamic penalties or whatever it is. So the other side of that is, just because you are a slower rider doesn't mean that you should ignore aerodynamic benefits.
No.
And what I found was really interesting, and these numbers are going to be super rough because it's fun. It's more fun to just throw out like these are equal. It turns out that if you're riding an equal distance, like let's say you're doing, I don't know,
40K time trial.
40K time trial.
Yeah.
That
which,
if you're,
for those that don't know what 40K is what, 24.8?
24.8, I believe.
Yeah,
Yes.
24.8 miles.
So let's just say, for example, that Jake is faster than I am. I mean, that's hypothetical.
I wish someday.
Let's say that Jake can put out more watts over 40K
Someday.
time.
So you would think, oh, well, aerodynamics are going to matter more for Jake than Matt. turns out it's not exactly the case. Because I am out there on the road longer than Jake, like I might be out there for an hour and Jake might be out there for 30 minutes, I'm going a lot slower, but aerodynamics still end up mattering percentage-wise about the same amount. So I might save, let's say I save 3 minutes by putting on an aero helmet versus a regular helmet. Jake might save the same amount, 3 minutes, but because he's going, faster, whatever it is. So the fact that I'm going slow, aerodynamics still matters. I'm out there longer, but I'm going slower. So there's this kind of like back and forth between like the aerodynamics benefits me less, but I'm out there longer, and it ends up being kind of a wash, which is crazy, right? Like we get the same benefit from buying a helmet or wheels or whatever it is. Because I'm out there longer, I am experiencing those marginal benefits, even though they're smaller benefits, but I'm out there for longer, so I get
in a larger
ends up
volume.
being out of-
Yeah,
larger
your net
volume, a little bit
gain.
of time.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
a net gain of time. It's a really good comparison. They also use wattage, but that's going to be a little bit harder to compare because wattage, right? Like you might get
There's a lot of factors in
greater
wattage,
percentage of wattage benefits because you're putting out more wattage. So
Gotcha.
it's pretty interesting. I love this stuff.
Yeah, there's other little things to take into consideration too, like altitude. That's going to have an effect on this.
aerodynamics.
Air pressure.
Air pressure is going to be
Right.
different up there.
There was I think some of us might remember when Bradley Wiggins did his hour record.
Yeah.
Yep.
And one of the things that I thought was super cool was like different days the air pressure would be different. And he literally knew like if the air pressure's not right, he's not going to be able to get the hour record.
And they knew this stuff like a while ago for the hour record. So the hour record is great to talk about aerodynamics with because it's where the cycling world found out a lot about this stuff. Where when the hour record was, if you were the best in the world at that time, you gave an hour attempt. They found, that Mexico City was
lower air density
was big.
because you're
Like,
at
that's
altitude.
where some pretty crazy records were being set. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, it's neat that when seconds matter, right? And it's like, hey, we know if a low pressure system comes through weather-wise, that could be the deal breaker.
Yeah.
That could be the difference. So
Let's get into some of the materials or the bikes and like the equipment, things of that nature. So bikes in general, like when we're out there doing our 40K time trial, and I'm just going to use that because that's what a lot of people use as a
smart reference.
a reference point to gauge who's doing what, where, when, why, and how. Just bikes alone, if you take a standard road bike out on the course of a 40K flat time trial where, elevation gain is not a factor there, and we'll say that all conditions are like nil, there's no wind at all, and then you took the same person or the same ability rider and they put them on an aero road bike, what would you say the difference is between the aero road bike and the traditional framed, like we'll say more of a round tube bike over 40K?
I'll say 2 minutes.
I was going to guess a minute and a half. I don't know.
That the studies are showing, or they're basically saying based on wind tunnel testing, that you're looking at a 2 minute difference.
2 minutes.
2
knew
minutes,
that,
just because of the frame. Now, if
I
you
just did
think
that
about
math
this,
in my head real quick. Yeah.
Nice work.
70%, like we were talking about earlier, you guys mentioned earlier,
Yep.
of the drag is coming from like our bodies,
person.
or the person, and 30% is coming from the bike. The thing about the bike is like, it's not changing. Nothing's really changing there. Like you're changing your body position and you're changing how you're manipulating yourself to go. Like that's a constant thing. That's on you. But the bike is always working for you. So when you can come up with a bike or you're on a bike that's more aerodynamic, that's always going to be like that 30%. Like if you can make that even more aerodynamic, that's always going to be working in your favor.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
What are some of the penalties for these bikes though? In this day and age, it's becoming less and less.
It used to be weight.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
But
but it's becoming less and less.
yeah, it's very hard.
Like everybody's on an aero. I mean, like when we're talking about the pro peloton now, everybody's on an aero.
when you look at,
Except
you
for those
have,
long climbing stages.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if
you have a few stages where it's just straight
everybody
up.
gets on their climbing bike. Yeah.
But for the most part, like if you look at the numbers, it's like any
Even on those
race where
stages,
there's
you talk about a descent.
Yep.
I mean, God, you can get if you
any
can get
race where
tucked in
there's where there's kind of a net zero gain of altitude, then aero bike's going to win. No problem.
Yeah.
But even a lot of the races that don't have that,
I asked myself this question this morning when I was thinking about this. I'm like, why? Because I ride a more of a traditional frame. I mean, it has some aerodynamic, characteristics to it. It's the BMC Team Machine, the SLR1 disc. That's a great bike, and it's got some good aerodynamic qualities to it. But I asked myself, based on the kind of riding that I typically do, the kind of racing that I'm typically into, why am I not riding BMC's Aero road bike, the Time Machine Road, that is built specifically for aerodynamics and has aerodynamics 100% in mind? And like a lot of the racing we do around here, there's nothing with a long sustained climb. Like there's climbs in there that might be, anywhere from a minute to 3 or 4 minutes at most.
Nothing that you're going to get a huge advantage on.
Aero road bike is definitely for racing. It's one of those things where it's like, it's probably a no-brainer. Like that's probably the better bike for you to use. So you might get a couple seconds, and a lot of times that's the difference between winning and losing. But there's so many other little factors too, right? Like what's more comfortable? What did you enjoy? What's priced better for you?
Yeah, well, the geometry between those two bikes isn't terribly different. They're very close.
Well, but there's other things too, like stiffness of the bike. And you like some compliance.
A little bit of compliance, and I do like to do some climbing. And if the Time Machine is going to be a little bit heavier, it's theoretically going to climb a little bit slower. And I do like to go out and do some climbing, and there's a lot of little things, but I think when you like start to sum up everything, like what's going to give you the best advantage, and why is it that you're not already on that bike? So I don't know if I'm just stuck in my own head, like I just need to be on this bike, and I love this bike. I like the way it rides and feels.
Yeah,
I mean, it probably maybe handles a little bit better, and I like
that's the other thing is to really look at.
Descending, there's little things there, but I question myself because a lot of the racing, like if we're going to go out to Portland International Raceway (PIR) and do the road race out there, that's all flat.
Not a lot of climbing.
You're going to go do any kind of a crit or most of the races around here. You're looking at a bike that you're going to be benefited by. Doing the road or the aero road bike,
more of an aerofoil.
Yeah, but let's not forget, like there's so much more to biking than racing in seconds. And I mean, what percentage of your biking is racing? Less than 10%. You're not racing that many. I mean,
but again, to go back, a lot of the rides that we do, I mean, we'll go out and ride 40 or 50 miles.
They're
and
basically races sometimes.
when at how many feet of elevation gain would you say is that threshold where it makes more sense to have one bike over another? Like if we're doing 50 miles,
it's got to be a 20-30 minute climb. I think for it to be something where you like need to go with the climbing bike today.
The bulk of our rides is like between like we'll say 2,500 and 3,000 feet of elevation gain, maybe a little bit more than that from time to time over like 40 to 50 miles. Does it make sense to be on a standard bike versus an aero road bike?
I think it almost, if you're just looking at speed, I think it almost always will be the aero road bike. Yeah. Almost always. Even on like, let's go ride Washougal. I don't think it's going to matter. You're right. Washougal's a hilly area.
Because we're descending quite a bit there, and I think you make up any difference on the aero road.
Now, I rode an aero road bike from 2011 all the way up until 2017 or 2018 when we started with
Aero Road.
Yeah, when we started with BMC, and I went to their Team Machine because that's what the Pro Peloton was riding, and they didn't even have the Time Machine. Well, they kind of did, but it was it just wasn't really what I was looking for.
Well, that was before the era of when everybody in the Peloton was going to.
Aero Road. And then they came out with their new one, their new Time Machine Road. Was it 2 years ago? So yeah. I don't know, just kind of like one of those interesting things. And another thing, like the like to do the Eddie Merckx category, like the Merckx or the Eddie category in the time trialing.
Do they allow aero road bikes?
They do.
Okay.
You can ride an aero road bike. You can't have wheels of depth of more than 40 millimeters. You can't wear the speed suits. You can't wear the aero teardrop or an aero specific helmet. Like
no road aero bars either.
Exactly. And you have to, basically get in your best possible position and go. But you can ride on that aero frame. Now, if we're saying over 40K, you're gaining 2 minutes. Well, it would stand to think that over 20K, which like the Jack Frost time trial is, if that's a minute difference,
that's a lot.
That's a lot. That is a ton of time. So
it theoretically, if 2 minutes is correct, then it should be exactly.
Freaking Chris Hamill just bought a Time Machine Road, man. What am I going to do? He's going to crush me.
Yeah, we're all in trouble.
All right, so you would have beat Chris, but
I would have.
But he was on.
But he's on a bike. So yeah.
Sorry, I just had to ask that question. So. What about other gear, Matt? You've done some pretty cool YouTube videos, like on just clothing. Let's get into the clothing component of it.
So number of times we've mentioned like your fat ass is the biggest part of the drag equation, right?
Yeah.
And one of the cheapest and easiest things that you can do is wear tight clothing. And it looks so good.
Oh, it does.
Tight clothing looks so good.
Oh, it's great. I mean, who doesn't want to walk into your favorite coffee shop wearing a helmet and spandex?
So Anything loose and flapping is costing you tons of time.
Unless the loose and flapping looks cool. So if it's like long hair, a beard, or a nice flannel, then the
What about
benefit is a wash.
his gravel flannel that he wears?
That's
on
a
his
very
gravel rides?
aerodynamic
It's a nice
gravel
look.
flannel.
It's a nice look. Yeah, and I did some video a long time ago, and I don't remember what the numbers were, but I wore like a t-shirt and like running
I remember
shorts.
this, yeah.
And I went out there and tested it, and it was even shorter than 20K. It was only like 8 miles. It was pretty short, and it was like a minute. It was like
was
a
pretty
minute difference.
significant.
It was huge. It was a huge difference. And so there's a lot of pieces to it. A lot of the speed suits that they make these days, and you can get this stuff for triathlon, or you can get this stuff for like time trial specific racing, but you'll also see it on like cyclocross racers. We might have seen it at the World Championships. I don't know if you guys noticed, but all those guys had basically speed suits.
They were wearing skin suits, yeah.
Yeah, and they'll basically to the fabric they'll add this dimpling piece to the fabric on certain places. So a lot of we talked about cylinders.
Like a golf ball almost is what they're trying to form.
Shoulders and upper arms, I think, are the primary places.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We talked about cylinders being slow through the wind. And there's things you can do like add these dimples to the fabric or add dimples, to different cylinder objects. And what that does is it basically trips the wind. And so the wind basically, it's the same concept.
Hugs the object.
Exactly.
More, right?
So the trips the wind and then it sticks. So basically the wind comes off the cylinder object later.
Okay.
So you have less of that low pressure area. Okay. So if you think about those swirls, they're smaller because the wind's been tripped and it's the wind's coming off the
Hugging
cylinder
the
object a little bit later.
Gotcha.
So they this was the easy classic example is the dimpled golf ball, right?
Yeah.
So they noticed that they made golf balls and they were like, man, the ones that are dented and beat up a little bit seem to go further. Well, they do go further, and that's because the wind basically it's causing less drag on that particular golf ball because it was all dented up. So they started making dimpled golf balls. They went further. I don't know. Someone made a lot of money off that idea. Yeah. But same thing with fabric, and they can do that on your arms, typically your shoulders and places like that. Where they even try it on some helmets and things like that.
I've seen that with the helmets. What was the company that has the
Louis Garneau? Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
And so the reason why that might not be, I'm sure they'll tell you that it saves you a lot of time or
your
whatever.
Head position better not change.
Well,
I'd imagine if you're shaking your head around a bunch.
Well, and also the helmets can be kind of that teardrop shape, which kind of nullifies the. Anyway, that's inside baseball. But material and tight-fitting material is extremely beneficial, and it's cheap compared to buying an aero road bike or a TT bike or whatever it is. And so there are way cheaper ways to gain aerodynamic speed than buying a bike or even buying wheels, right? Yeah. Because you can look at your helmet as this huge frontal area thing, and typically anything that's towards the front of the bike is going to make a bigger difference in aerodynamics. That's your best bang for buck.
Yeah. If you're looking to spend a lot of money on aero and you do not have a lot of money to spend on aero,
right? Which is
ranking from what I've seen, is the disc wheel's awesome, but it's not actually. It's everything like Matt just said that touches the air first. So even like the little tri-rig front brake that covers up if you have an exposed front brake on your TT bike. A helmet, an aero helmet that's teardrop shaped, and just your tightest, most aero clothing. Yeah. Those are your three biggest bang for bucks.
You got to think that's if you were to spend $300, which I guess you can probably do, $300 on clothing, versus $3,000 on a bike. You're probably going to get a better benefit from the clothing.
Probably. Which is crazy. Honestly, if your goal is a 20K, 40K time trial.
I've actually got some numbers jotted down here that I sourced. Off the interwebs,
I'm sure it's accurate then.
So it's 100% right.
Skin suits over 40 kilometers.
40K, yep.
2 minutes.
Wow. Which is the same as what we had for the bike, which is switching from a road bike to an aero bike.
That's ridiculous. 2 minutes.
Yep.
Getting into the aero helmet, 1 minute.
Only 1 minute?
1 minute difference. Wheels, if you went from a traditional 30 millimeter wheel to a 64 millimeter wheel, and it's just because that's what they were using for this particular study.
Which is not the deepest by any means.
Nope, not at all. 48 seconds over 40K.
Okay.
So
those close to the helmet. So this is, getting to the point of
I would love to see the front, I would love to see one on just exposed cabling in the front too.
Yeah, but probably not a ton. Because those cables are so small.
Yeah, they are. But that's
drag.
But that's that's just electrical tape.
Right,
you can
add electrical tape.
In that same breath, let's talk about the frames in general. So if I were to tell you all right, rim brake versus disc brake, which one's going to be faster from
disc?
Disc brake, Matt. What are you going to
I
say?
would guess.
I'm going to say that depends on the yaw angle.
Ah.
That's the right answer because they can.
Yeah, it is.
So what's interesting is when you have that -15 to +15.
Yeah.
Certain sides of the bike you can actually see the disc within the aerodynamic graph.
Yeah.
Which is, but usually they can hide rim brakes from the wind, and so
Some of the aero road bikes, the way that they put fairings in front of and
Yes.
actually guard the entire braking mechanism and part of even the disc itself, I
Right.
think can play to an advantage. But there's another thing that we're not really taking into consideration here, and that's the ability to, when you're talking about just your forward velocity, and then you're talking about that rim brake being up there at the top, and you've got the caliper, that's going to be, causing some drag there, correct?
Yes.
You all of a sudden remove that completely from the
Yes.
picture here. So that does one of two things. A, it's not there creating drag, but B, you can get a lot more creative with that frame design and the way that you can actually lay up the carbon fiber or build the bike to create a more aerodynamic situation. So I think the net gain there is, and the numbers here are going to support that going with a disc brake setup is much, much more beneficial.
I don't know. It's still early on because just like you said, you can redesign. Like let's take
a fully housed front brake,
So-
rim brake. I know
there's a lot.
yeah.
There's a lot to this. So if you think about the fork of a bike, right? So you have the aerodynamic of the front wheel itself. But because you have the caliper brakes or whatever it is, your fork can only be so wide because you need to be able to have like this piece to actually grip onto. With discs, it can be wider, so you can have basically two different frontal areas: the front wheel itself and then the forks separate. So you have two different disturbances of the wind piece there, which is good. And then you can redesign the bike, just like you were saying. And then you really have some benefits. And I still don't think bike companies are quite there yet as far as doing that. I think some weird, like Specialized has that one weird bike, and a couple other bike companies. Not a ton of bike companies are taking full advantage of this. But when you have that really tight fork next to the wheel, it's kind of considered like one particular disturbance to the wind.
It's more of a foil. Yeah.
I think it's really hard to say which one wins aerodynamically at this point.
From what I was reading, everybody's leaning towards the disc.
I think everyone's leaning towards the disc because that's where the industry is going.
Well, it's
for
going
sure.
that way for a couple different reasons. But going back to that felt ARR,
Right.
They're solely only being sold as a disc bike.
Yeah.
You can't buy a rim brake version of it. BMC's Time Machine Road, you can only buy it in a disc brake. And there are more of these aerodynamic-based bikes that are going with just a disc. Now, yes, it's part because people like the disc brake because it brakes so much better, but I think that there's a component there that plays into the aerodynamics of it. If you're building a bike that's built on aerodynamics and they're able to make it more aerodynamic based on the use of a disc brake, that makes sense.
I haven't seen a lot of stuff that said discs are more aerodynamic than brake caliper.
It's not just the disc. It's just it's that setup in conjunction with how they can design
Shape
the frame.
bike.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, I think we're in a weird cross position right now where it's like we're just starting to see TT bikes with discs.
Yep.
And if as soon as people are like, you redesign the bike this way and it's faster with a disc, then everyone's going to jump on board.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of holdouts.
I haven't seen a ton of data really out on that. I mean, I know in the road biking world, I'm saying the disc are more aero, but I have not heard much in the TT world.
think
Because
right
everything
now-
was housed in the TT world. Like it's different when
Right. You have hidden rim
everything,
brakes.
yeah.
Right. So I also think disc brakes way more.
Yep.
So there's a little bit of something to that for sure, which isn't a big deal on TT bikes.
Yeah,
it's
but I think
something.
the more studies you look into with actual weight benefit on climbs, like I mean, if you got a TT and you've got 1-2 minute 3% climb, like but weight is not making a massive difference.
The
there.
net is going to be positive.
You
still
can
just
brake
based on
later.
when you're
things
talking
like
about
that.
a few grams.
Yeah.
So to go back to your original question though, Evan, was like, does all of the cabling off the front of the bike? I think it does play a part.
Yes.
And another thing to take into consideration there is the aero handlebars. That's another thing that
The foiled aero bars is huge,
Talking
yeah.
about what Matt was talking about, things that are cylinder-esque, your typical round bar.
Frontal area too.
Yeah, and then just flattening that out and having a little bit more of that teardrop shape. I think that's going to play a pretty significant role because if you think about it, that's one of the first things that touches the wind.
Yep.
And I think that's going to have an effect on your overall aerodynamics as well. Correct, Matt?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Along with yourself is what touches that wind first,
Fatty.
as we have talked about, is my large hands. touching the wind first.
So that's interesting.
Especially in the TT position.
So yeah, and so it turns out gloves are really slow.
Really?
Yeah.
This is why I don't bike. I generally do not bike with gloves unless I'm gravel riding.
Yeah, but you know what? If it's cold, you gotta
Have your gloves
keep
on. Now,
Yeah, it's
Castelli makes for the custom line. We used to use Castelli, and they had an aerodynamic road glove that you could wear.
Yeah. Which are probably super thin, and it probably smooths out from your hand to your like TT sleeve or something like that.
Yeah.
Probably for sure
Smoothing
rips
out.
when you crash.
I don't know.
Tire selection. Talking about the different widths and different tires in general. Now, I don't want to get into the rolling resistance. Let's just talk about the aerodynamics component of it. And like wheel widths and things of that nature. What do you have to say on that, Matt?
I'm going to get in trouble for this. Narrow is more aerodynamic by its nature. Like,
okay.
None of us, and I know you want to disagree with me.
So decrease the area is what you're saying.
Decrease the area. Technically, it will be more aerodynamic. Now, none of us are riding fat bikes when we're going out for the Jack Frost time trial.
Correct.
0 of us would choose that bike, right? A lot of people will write down if you read the internet forums, they will tell you that wider is more aerodynamic, which is not true. Wider might be faster, but wider is not necessarily more aerodynamic.
You're talking about rolling resistance is where
rolling
it's faster.
resistance
They used to
gets
rephrase it as faster. It may be faster,
but they will tell you that it's more aerodynamic. Which is wrong. But there's a lot more to this, and that has and this really comes down to the shapes of tires and wheels combined.
Correct.
So I know we said let's not talk about rolling resistance, but we do know that you can go wider and you get better rolling resistance, just by going a little bit wider, and we can keep some of those aerodynamic benefits by having a wider rim where the actual tire and the rim form a nice, kind of teardrop shaped. And we talked about why teardrop shapes are faster. And so if you can get some of these things to kind of combine or whatever, then you can get a pretty aerodynamic, wheel shape.
yes.
All things being equal, narrow would be more, quick. And aerodynamics kind of piece.
So in terms of width, is there a point of diminishing returns? Is there because the industry just keeps pushing out more and more. Just not too many years ago, it was like everybody's on 23, and all of a sudden everybody's on 25, and everybody's riding 28s, and they're even talking about going bigger than that. Where do we start to get some of those diminishing returns from how big these tires are actually?
So the answer to that is super complex because you have lots of different pieces of the puzzle. You have road conditions, which I think no one's really thinking like, hey, road conditions are different even within a race that you're doing. Like you're doing one race and the roads are pretty good for half of it and half of it they're pretty bad. And turns out that, like based on road conditions, certain widths of tires will be better, specific rolling resistance. And then, you choose that and you choose your tire and you choose your rim width and all these things based on those road conditions.
Yeah.
You would theoretically want to go more narrow if you could.
God forbid we get into talking about PSI too. But
right, exactly.
Obviously all those like factor in. Yeah, that.
So I don't think that there's a magic number of like which tire width is the best or anything like that. If you're riding gravel, probably, those 40s that you rode on, you're riding those yesterday, right? That's
42s, yep.
42s.
Yeah.
That's it's probably faster than my 23s.
On gravel, yeah.
Absolutely on gravel, yeah. I wouldn't want to be riding those 42s in a time trial though, 40K out on the road, so.
They do amazingly well. I mean, I'll be out riding on the road. Granted, it's not going to be anywhere close, but they do. Actually,
they do pretty. They hang on pretty well. Yeah.
I just going off of RPE. I don't have a heart rate monitor. I have a heart rate monitor. I don't have a power meter on my gravel bike yet. Ask me in a week. And then you're going off a rate of perceived exertion. Rolling down the road, I'm like, I'm probably going like 17 miles an hour. I look down, I'm going 21. I'm like, because I had to connect a few dots, and I was riding through Washougal on some back roads, and I'm riding down just like a bike lane, and I'm like, I'm actually moving along pretty good. And there was like a slight little tiny breeze that I was riding into. I'm like, that's interesting. So anyway, I don't know, just a little tangent there.
Yeah, I think if we were all riding on like glass roads, then we would probably ride some pretty
18s.
We would probably ride high. Well, I think we'd ride higher pressure tires.
Yeah.
Potentially, we might go narrow, but a lot of the, it's all not just one little thing. It's not just like
Yeah.
the tires. It's not just the wheels. It's how it all plays into the bike itself and in the fork. And we talked about how that different shapes of bikes can affect things.
You'd want it to
differently.
be as close to that fork, but as lean as possible, basically. Yeah.
you either it's one of two ways. You either want the fork to be really tight, or you want to kind of go wide. So it's either you don't want that in between part where it's like we're breaking the wind twice and we're not getting the benefits of it. And so basically that's the original way they designed forks was for it to all be one piece, one aerodynamic piece, and then now they're like, hey, we can go wide and we can get faster.
Just two separate pieces.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was kind of a loaded question. I knew that going into that, and basically, there's so many variables that go on or that come into play here. And there's like, where's your net positive coming from? Is it coming from aerodynamics? Is it coming from road conditions and compliancy and just the rolling resistance in general? So they're saying that there's up to a 9% variation depending upon all of those things in question. So
Multiple
really,
right
it's just
answers.
like at the end of the day, know what you're going to be using for that respective situation, and then find something that's a good all around for training on. And then just when it comes to racing, if you really want to get as fast as you possibly can, know the course, know the conditions, and set up accordingly.
Yeah. Know the road conditions, how rough the road is, and things like that. Also, if you look at if you know your wheels and the rim width, that should affect what tires and things like that you choose, and that plays into aerodynamics as well as rolling resistance for sure. So,
do you guys want to get into one last little thing here real quick on this and talk about just like our upper body position? Because I think that's an important one for people on the whole, for us to kind of talk about like our position on the bike. And everybody's automatically going to go to, well, the flatter you can get, the better. And that's true, but it's not always true.
Well, it's definitely, I mean, it can't be 100% true, right? Because you could lose.
And
I can get
is-
really flat Superman position with
Yeah.
my legs off the pedals. I'm not going to go that fast.
Yeah, just like the video that you saw circulating around with the guy laying
Goes-
his belly
Oh,
on
it's
the,
so cool.
the
Yeah, I love
saddle
that.
and feet
Like
straight back.
flying
And,
by.
yeah, so obviously that's going to be super aero. And then you think about like the super tuck. That's another place.
Chris Boardman. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about just the standard upright position. Well, let's talk about 4 different positions. Standard upright position, hands on the hood. Taking your body and dropping it down onto the drops with your elbows relatively straight, and then getting down into the drops with your elbows bent, therefore dropping your torso down a little bit more. And then the last one's going to be your bent over position with your hands on the hoods and your arms parallel to the ground. If I were just to ask you, and you guys already know the answer here, but just pretend like you didn't know the answer, like what would your gut automatically tell you? What's going to be the most aerodynamic position?
Pharaoh.
When you're out riding, it feels like when you go into the drops, arms straight, it feels like that's the fastest position. You're getting nice and low, and that's just kind of like your gut feeling that this should be the fastest position. Not always the case.
No.
Yeah.
So here's some. Go ahead.
So and just to go off Matt's point is that we think that I think because we're dropping our head down, so we're getting out of that upright position like Jake mentioned first. So you think, oh, I'm decreasing my frontal area, but what you don't realize is that in those drops don't angle inward.
Right.
You are still shoulder width wise the same width.
And your arms
The height may be decreasing, but you're still the same width.
We talked about arms and them in cylinder objects being slow, and here your arms are nice and wide. You've got a very full cylinder of each arm in the
exposed to the
drops.
wind. Yeah.
Whereas if you think of time trial position, right, where your arms are tucked in, and right now a lot of the triathletes, the pros, they're super narrow, right?
Yes.
Because I don't know, that's the thing.
The folded as the position I got into later this season is the folded hand position is like what like all the cool kids are doing in the triathlon world now. It's everyone wants that stacked hand position. So
we're cool.
Yeah.
Here's some numbers for you guys.
Okay.
All 4 of those positions in a wind tunnel with the wind blowing at 28 miles an hour, which was to simulate what the average speed would be in like a Peloton time trial or a triathlon.
Was this which wind tunnel? Was this a specialized wind tunnel?
I don't recall off the top of my head. I could probably go back and
That's
reference
all right.
that.
That's
But
okay.
God, I wish I was
anyway,
going 20
so
miles an hour all triathlon.
in order to overcome that 28 mile an hour wind, the upright position with your hands on the hoods and arms relatively straight took 430 watts to overcome that. Going into the drops with straight arms, a little bit better, 417 watts.
Okay.
Oh, that's reasonable.
Drops with the arms bent.
Yep.
So bringing your
Okay.
torso down a little bit more.
Decreasing the cylinder.
Uh-huh.
Decreasing that cylinder.
385 watts.
Wow.
Oh,
that's a big drop.
that's a huge drop.
And then going with your hands up on the hoods, bent over with your
Pharaoh.
your arms parallel to the ground, 372
There
watts.
you go. Yep.
That's
Well,
your
I cheated. We talked about this before, but I'll pretend like I knew that off the
So
bat.
just the difference between the fastest and the slowest positions there.
That's 60
is
watts.
3 minutes over a 40K time trial.
Yeah.
So, and you
3
can look at the
minutes.
watt differences in terms of the percent differences, and you can figure out how much faster each position is. So,
Yep.
In years past, again, I keep talking about the Jack Frost time trial. I've always had my hands in the drops, with my elbows slightly bent and my torso down as low as I can so that I can create optimal power production. And then last year, we talked about this prior to it, and we were talking about some different advantages that we could possibly give ourselves to get into the most aerodynamic position for that. I went with that different position with my hands up on either on the bars, just that one out in front of me, or up on the hoods, elbows bent, trying to keep them parallel to the ground and keep my torso as low as I possibly could, so without my shoulder absolutely rejecting me. And I set a personal record, despite the fact that I just come off of being pummeled by a car, less than 10 or 8 months earlier. So I think that's testament to the fact that position's probably going to be the best when you're out there racing, riding, whatever.
Yep.
Thoughts?
I think that means that you need to now buzzsaw off your drops and just go track bike style into that.
I think that there might be a little bit better bike control in the drops. So I think a lot of times when people are descending down mountains or whatever it is, they might use the drops because you're wider, which means you've got a little bit better bike handling.
I'm going to stop you right there and say I 100% disagree.
Yeah. No. Okay. So
Hands on the hoods always when I'm
hoods.
descending. And I will get into that.
Well, that's a hot take.
Well, that's us, we're not racing in the tour, but look at the guys that are racing in the tour. Are they in the drops?
They're almost
when they
always in the
descend?
drops, yeah. But I know Jake has talked about this before. Yeah.
I'm not even descending these days. I walk my bike down hills.
Whenever I descend, my hands are on the hoods, and I will lower my body down to get lower to be more aerodynamic. But
you lower yourself
I
down
just
without
flat
putting
out.
your
I
hands
just
down
don't use my drops when I'm descending.
you should get rid of your drops.
You
I
should.
probably could.
Yeah,
Be faster.
seriously, just
You'll
sever
save
them
some
off.
weight.
Yeah. Decrease that frontal area.
Who's the Phil Guyman? Cut off
when he did his
Guyman does. Well,
did-
that's for.
because he's doing his climbing.
Guyman
stuff.
was trying to
Strava
shave every
Caleb's-
grand that he
yeah.
could off.
Yeah.
That bike was so stinking light when he was done with it. That was nuts.
Oh yeah,
So,
he was wearing a skin suit for a climb. Like that's how serious he was about that.
all right. One last thing on this particular topic before we get into the real one last thing is let's talk about the torso position where you start to see some diminished returns on how flat you get your body. So we'll say that you're relative to the ground, you're at a 24% degree angle with your torso lifted. As you come back down closer to a flat 0%, you're actually going to start losing watts. And you're going to start slowing yourself down. It's going to affect your breathing. It's going to affect your the amount of energy that you're having to put into the bike, and you're going to actually produce less watts because the angle and the way that you're activating your hips and your legs and things of that nature.
Yep.
Is there a happy number in there that you guys think would be the most ideal so that we can get ourselves into that most aerodynamic and low position without losing?
Speaking from a physical therapy point of view, the amount of factors that go into that make it impossible to come up with an average, I would say.
So it's going to be relative
Person's anatomy,
specific to the person.
Very specific.
So
and
like a good example is Chris Handel can get hella
Can
flat
he get low?
and he can go fast, and then
and that's the other thing is are you getting, and this is where we were talking about this a little bit before. Are you getting flat or are you getting more what's the right word? More spherical on the top. Look at your best time trialing positions. And I always use the example of Lance Armstrong. I think it was like 2009.
Yeah.
When he, people were commenting on how arched his thoracic spine was.
Yeah.
What was so aerodynamic about him was the teardrop of his helmet was basically touching the middle of his back in between his shoulder blades. So imagine, just like we talked about those foils, now if he had gotten flat and now that teardrop is not connected to his back, that's two separate foils there instead of one foil. So
interesting. Yeah.
It's not just getting flat, it's actually getting, imagine if you were like a hill, like you're trying to take that hill and make it as congruent as possible for that air to flow over the top.
Yep.
So for power production, just like Jake said, like activating your hips. When we're talking about activating your hips, what we're talking about is the angle of pull that your glutes have when you're sinking into that position. And I'll use the example of like really bad aerodynamic positions when you look at, and I'll bash my own people for once, triathletes who are just getting into their first aero positions. Usually what it looks like is just them trying to tilt their pelvis forward, and they'll get on the very edge of the saddle and shove themselves forward to where like they're beyond their elbows. like their chest is in front of their elbows over the aero bars. And they think that that's more aero because now I'm really far on the saddle and I'm kind of tucked down in front here. But what's actually happened is that angle, that hip flexion that you sit in has just increased to where your knees almost need to flare out to the side for your leg to come up. Mm-hmm. That's not a powerful. If your if your knee angle is having to flare out to the side when your knees come up, that's not a good powerful position. No. You need to get to where that low back can flex into a position where you've got this nice hill basically coming up over your back where that wind can grab the side of you and just come straight over the top of you.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Which is where when you look at somebody like Handel, I bet his hip flexion angle is not changing too much because he still puts great power out in that position.
Yeah.
So it's more about how flexible are you through your low back and thoracic spine. Yeah.
So what I was reading is that
they going say something like 10% or something.
Well, it's 14%.
14%.
Yeah. So you're losing about 51 watts when you go from that 24 degrees down to flat. Typically, on the whole,
that's a huge drop. Yeah.
But and I'm not even close to that because I don't have the flexibility, right? Yeah. So it's just like, what power do you lose? Versus that.
What are you picking up in aerodynamics?
Right, exactly.
You have to be able to, you have to gain a certain amount of speed before all of a sudden everything's
in aerodynamics.
So, and again, it just comes back to being relative to the person. So I think your best bet is to, once you've kind of got all the little nuances figured out and you're really good in that position, is go out and start testing yourself.
Yeah, exactly. That's the great answer with this is how do I know what my fastest position is? You got to go out and try it because it's different for every person.
And this is going to segue nicely into a little thing that I wanted to kick over to Matt real quick. And this might be part of his one last thing is tell me a little bit about this Garmin device that you've heard about.
So this is super interesting. Jake just said we all need to go out and test. Testing is extremely hard for this stuff because the only right way to do it would be go to the track and test some stuff where the conditions are pretty set in stone or wind tunnel. But Garmin, and there are a couple other companies that are, there's one that's called Nokia or something like that. I can't remember what they're called. But there's a couple different companies that are coming out with similar products. And they're basically wind speed sensors with barometric pressure readers and things like that. And what they do is they take in a whole bunch of different variables. And one of their goals, if they also take in power, is to give you your CDA, like a live CDA. So you would be able to see that number on your bike computer as you're out doing whatever. You tuck your shoulders, you raise your head, you see those CDA numbers change as you're riding. So these are super interesting products. They're just starting to come onto the market. Garmin bought a company called, I don't remember what it was called, Aeropod. Oh, that's what it was called, Aeropod or something like that. So they bought that company, and they're about to release this product imminently. So one of the videos that I want to make for my YouTube channel is expectations for this product coming from Garmin.
Absolutely.
I'm really looking forward to it. I will most likely be like front and center in line to purchase this thing just because I want to use it to do aero testing as much as possible, just because I find this stuff super fun and interesting. What's really interesting about this Garmin product is if you don't have a power meter, the idea is that they can use those same dynamics not to come up with your CDA, but to instead estimate your power.
Yeah, it's like reverse engineering all of the input metrics to get that power number.
Right. It's like, here's the two sides of the equation. If you have one, then we can give you the CDA. But if you're missing that, then guess what? We can kind of estimate your power based on the data that we have. And so it's not going to be necessarily the best power meter on the market, but at $300, it's one of the more affordable power meters.
Yeah.
The name that they're coming up for this is probably going to be the Garmin Vector Air. And they're calling it the Garmin Vector Air Power Meter, which I find odd because the thing that I'm most excited about is that CDA number.
Yeah.
Which, you would need a power meter in conjunction with the Vector Air Power Meter to get a CDA number. So super interesting. The other thing that we overlooked was shaving. We never touched
you know what?
base
I had that on the list and we just didn't get there. So shaving, go.
That is a very cheap way for you to, we're talking I mean, most of us have razors at home.
Isn't
Not
it something
Evan.
like
Evan doesn't have a razor.
40
at home.
seconds over 40K or something, like 30 to 40 seconds? It was a
Yeah.
significant amount
It's
of
a
time.
significant amount of time. That was shaving your legs.
Just your legs, yeah.
So,
If
and then
anybody wants a really funny video
Oh.
thing to look at, just look at Jesse Thomas's wind
Right.
tunnel testing. It was
yeah,
hilarious.
he did wind tunnel testing with
Yeah.
Specialized because he used to be sponsored by Specialized,
Uh-huh.
and he shaved his leg because they were doing a photo shoot, and they were like, we need to double test this because we're getting like some crazy numbers.
Jesse had some pretty thick leg hair, I think.
He also had some thick leg
Yeah.
hair. So yeah, and it's about half the benefit for shaving your arms. So you might
Wow.
get like 40 seconds in a 40K for shaving your legs and 20 seconds for
So
shaving your arms.
conventional thought is that your face beard has no effect.
Is
That's
more
what they're
aerodynamic.
when they've tested the beards in wind tunnels, they weren't able to
Inconclusive?
yeah. Which is surprising. My gut feeling is that it does probably have some effect, but that it was just not enough to test. And my other thought would be like, this is frontal area that's already, the wind's already going to be disturbed.
Yeah.
And so, whether or not you have a beard disturbing it or your normal face and chest, not a big difference.
Matt,
So,
my beard is silky smooth. There's
It
no
is.
way
In
that's
fact,
disturbing the air in any way. It's making
yours
friends with
and,
the air.
and Lance's like porn stash, those are probably super aerodynamic.
I think actually it's making friends with the air as it goes by so
is.
much that it just wraps perfectly around my head,
That's
just
right.
propels me and
The
lands
wind,
forward.
the wind
Yeah.
is like, ooh, yeah, that
Yeah.
felt good.
I know for Lance's handlebar stash, like great mustache, man.
Yeah.
All right, that was fun. There's a lot more that we didn't even get into.
I
So
know.
it's just
This is a long one too. I'm
it's
not
a
sure
chat-
we really got into that. Yeah.
It's a crazy topic that you can kind of go, engineers spend their whole life working on this stuff. So
Yeah.
we probably did not do it justice.
And from
so,
a PT point of view, I want to go on for like
Oh,
days
yeah.
about this. There's so much you can like talk about for this. But this is almost like when we do like our doping podcast. We always end
just
it with
go.
like, man, we could talk about this for like 20
we,
more days.
we should apologize because none of us are engineers. So
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry if we murdered any
today.
of these.
I should have my little brother call in who is an engineer and
Yep.
just roast me on this. Like, just absolutely be like, Evan, you are an idiot. Like, you don't understand any of this.
For what it's worth, though, I do think that there's some good info here for people to start playing
Yeah,
with,
yeah.
and I do think that there's a lot of inexpensive ways and a lot of very expensive ways to make yourself a little bit faster and more aerodynamic.
it's true.
So
That's the one hopeful thing. I'll make my one last thing that you should be hopeful that 80 to 70% of the drag is you. And it is free to change your own position.
Yeah.
With the help. You should probably go and see a fitter. But it's much, much less expensive than buying a new bike, just like Matt
Yeah.
said. Yeah.
yeah, so that's your one last thing.
That's my one last thing.
All right, we'll
Go see a
do
fitter.
The aero drag is you.
Matt, you got one last thing for us?
Oh, I got a last thing. YouTube videos.
Oh, bring it.
I'm trying to get some out there. I'm trying to push them out. I posted something last week with the Blue 70 goggles that you guys should go hop on. You don't even have to watch the video. Just comment
Already
on the
seen it.
video.
Love it.
You didn't comment, did you? You need
I
to
didn't. I
comment
know,
so
I
that you
forgot
can
to-
win the goggles.
Here's the reason I didn't comment. I don't know my YouTube login right
All right,
now.
get on it.
No, I'm serious. I lost the password
Get some
of my YouTube.
Get some IT support. Get some help. Get your
Lost
Do I need to
my
call
password.
YouTube?
get your. Yeah.
I did. I lost my password to YouTube.
Hit the button, the link,
you need
send
to
it
be
to your
able to-
email.
It won't let me comment unless you're logged into your
Yes,
account.
you need to be able to comment so that you can win the Blue 70 goggles. And then I posted another video just this weekend talking about the Lakeside Long Run. So if you hear us, Evan and I talking, going on and on about how that run is super cool and it's super pretty, you're running along the lake, you can see some of that video.
Sunday was beautiful. We had so many people there too. It was great.
Yeah.
I just missed you guys.
Did you really?
No, Evan actually saw me and almost honked at me.
I was driving up past Lake Road after my ride, and guess who I see pulling out of the neighborhood onto Lake Road? Jake.
Nice. Well, I put some drone footage out there.
Did you?
Yeah, yeah. It's on the.
You know what I need
YouTubes.
to do is I just need to come down there and do that so you can
fun.
be in your own video.
That'd be nice.
Oh, yeah.
I'll get you
That'd
some
be nice.
footage.
I do tend to have a hard time filming myself for a lot
Yeah.
of this stuff. The other thing that I'm working on right now is another goggle video. I'm going to basically do a series on finding good goggles.
Goggle
basically, for
throwdown?
swimming. Sort of, yeah. And oh my gosh, I found the really, really nice pair of goggles that they're expensive, but they're so nice. It's called the Magic 5 goggles, and I didn't want to like them, but I love them.
Are they aerodynamic?
Yes.
Can I wear them on my bike?
Yes.
Awesome.
They are custom printed to your face. So you scan your face and then you get this. And 2 weeks later, they send you the goggles and the gasket doesn't look like a normal gasket, but they are just perfect. So they don't leak at all. And
I have a
they're
weird
really
face
good.
that leaks with every goggle except for one pair I've ever found.
Okay,
so
well-
I kind of need to try these.
So since you're
They're
famous,
expensive though. They're 56. Well,
That's fine.
The more expensive one was $56, but there's lots of little ways that you can kind of save money. Like you can kind of get this subscription service and get a lower price or whatever. But
So now that you're the
Super
more
impressed.
famous Matt Legrand YouTuber,
Yes.
did they reach out to you?
No. Well, so I told them I was gonna do all these tests or whatever, and then they said we'll send you some goggles, and then the owner, the founder of the company, called me and we talked for like half an hour.
Wow.
And super cool guy.
No big deal. Nice.
And he's from like Denmark or somewhere, and he like really impressed me, just kind of like talking about the technology, and I had a lot of questions about like, are you really scanning, like what, how much detail are we getting? Because my original thought was like, I know exactly what they're doing. They're looking at like one metric, which is like the distance between your eyes, and the rest of it they're just kind of like glossing over. And that's not the case. It is a real 3D scan of your face with 1 million data points as opposed to like 2, which is kind of what I thought it was. And then the goggles showed up, and I was really impressed with how they fit and feel, and the visibility is good. And I really struggled to find any dislikes. So what I really want to do when I do any of these product reviews is say, this is this and this is that, and then always end with like, I have some dislikes about this product, because I don't want people to think that I'm just shilling products.
Yeah.
Man, I struggle to find dislikes.
What was the dislike, or do we have to watch the video?
Because you're usually
I haven't
things'
been-
biggest critics. So if you liked these much, I'm going to get them.
I really liked them, and so for $50, so my normal pair of goggles that I really do like are $7. So for $56, I'm thinking like,
That's a lot of pair of goggles you could buy.
The dislike has got to be the price, right?
Yeah.
Custom fitted goggles, I can't argue with that price being like $56.
But if you wear
kinda
that
cheap.
for the next however many years,
Well,
I'll
no.
pay $56 for my eyes not hurting.
I think you're still gonna eventually need to change them out, and that's why I think there's
Yeah.
a subscription model of, I think it's like $38 if you do that. Then it's like twice a year you get a pair of goggles, and you're paying $38 for them. It's more reasonable. Whereas like the Blue 70 goggles that I tested recently were somewhere between $35 and $40, depending on which one you got. It's like, why not just get custom goggles as opposed to paying the same price for some goggles
I'm all for that.
might not fit? So
Huh.
I'm
3D
impressed.
3D printed?
3D printed, sort of. They're doing a special manufacturing process. That's where the patent stuff comes in. But
Interesting.
yeah, they're nice. They're really
Have
nice.
you tried out those digital ones yet? And we're just
Yeah, I have them sitting on my desk. So this is there's another pair of goggles that's going to be in this goggle shootout series called the Form goggles, and they have a heads-up display coming soon. I'm guessing it'll be at least 2 weeks before I have a video out about those. But
So
yeah, they're
Jerry's sitting in his car right now in his garage, beating his head against his
last
steering
thing.
wheel.
Come
going,
on,
God,
last
just
thing."
finish this thing up and stop talking
It's got to
about
be
triathlon.
one last thing, not 2, 3 last things. It's one last thing.
Yeah, my one last thing could just be goggles. Reviews. Goggles.
Swimming.
Goggles.
Jake, go.
One last thing. Go ride your bike this week, kids. Woo.
Oh yeah.
That's it. All right, well, you guys, we really appreciate you listening. We will see you next week. Bye for now.
Nobody really knows why, but you have to shave your body. Shave your legs, shave your chest, shave everything. If anyone asks you why, choose from the following.
Yeah, it makes me more aero. You slide better when you crash. It's better for massages. Haven't you read the rules? Everyone else does it.